Thank you, crew, for joining us today, and welcome to the John Minnie Podcast, where we explore all things urban horticulture, indoors and out, through the perspectives of the many amazing people who've made it their career. I'm your host, Mark Minnie, president of John Minnie Distinctive Landscapes, and at John Minnie, our purpose is to make places beautiful by bringing nature to the places people live, work, and play. Today, I'm in New York City sitting down with two teammates from the John Minnie team, Matt Wessel, the Director of Outdoor, and Scott Alborn, Sales and Design Representative. Combined, these two pros have over 40 years of experience in urban landscaping, and we sit down to discuss the role of annual plants in the urban landscape. Our conversation touches on how they think about annuals in their landscape design, when and how to use annuals and seasonal plants, the emotional connections that annuals have the power to create, and how annuals need to be balanced with considerations for the environment and society. All right, so without further ado, let's head over to my conversation with Scott and Matt. All right, Matt, Scott, welcome to the John Minnie Podcast.
Thank you.
You guys excited to be here?
Sure am.
I'm pumped. You guys are two professionals in the industry, teammates of mine. You guys are wildly talented, and I'm just pumped to be talking on, as you guys know, annuals today and their role in urban landscaping. Like, I'm sure we may agree at times or disagree, but I want to get everyone's perspective and thoughts on annuals and their role. Sounds like a plan?
It does.
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. So why don't you each start by just giving a little context on your respective roles on the John Minnie team, and years of experience, stuff like that.
Scott Alborn. I started with John Minnie 18 years ago now. Cool. And worked for previous 15 in the city. Coming on board John Minnie was one of the best decisions I've ever made. I have a 4-year degree in landscape architecture from Michigan State. And went on to get a minor in horticulture just to help back that up.
Nice. And all 30 plus of those years are in urbanscaping too, like
yes.
In the city too. Cool. Nice.
Cool. My name is Matt. Matt Wessel. I'm the Director of Outdoor. I've been with John Minnie for just shy of a decade. Held various roles throughout the company, but I oversee a lot of annual seasonal plantings. Worked closely with Scott for most of my career, and I've learned a lot from him. Really appreciate that.
Oh, that's cool. And it's cool that you guys have different perspectives too, just in your current roles, right? On the front, well, both of you dealing with the client a lot and front facing, but you're on the sales design side of life. You're obviously getting involved often in sales and design, but you're also in charge of running the outdoor department, which means like I got to care for these landscapes, these urban landscapes, these annuals that are in there. So gives like a little different flavor, I think, of perspective. So
the balance between like the demands of the desired look and like the operational challenges to execute the planting or, like you said, maintain it. It's definitely a yin and yang balance.
Hell yeah.
And to want to set the team up with a good perspective so that what you're designing and giving the client is sustainable and they can do it.
Definitely. That's a good point. It's got to be synergies between all teams. So Matt, I think this was your idea. So we're talking about annuals in the urban landscape, but we should start by defining what an annual is. It's your idea, so I'm going to throw it to you.
Totally. I took a stab in just looking up some definitions on the dictionary. So an annual plant, that's a plant that would complete its life cycle in one season, lives and dies within a year. A seasonal planting, that'd be more focused towards a plant that would grow best during a certain time of the year, season, summer, fall, spring.
Okay. So let's dig into those definitions, because I think it's interesting you like look it up, but when you look up a lot of things in our industry, there's a lot of varying.
There's gray.
Yeah, it's like different opinions, I guess, or just misinformation sometimes when you look things up. So dive into what's an annual versus a seasonal more. So seasonals can be used as annuals, or seasonals sometimes perennials, or?
Well, a seasonal planting, I would say, that's more focused around the seasonality of our industry. So like I said, a spring, a summer, a fall, even like a winter seasonal planting. An annual planting, I think that plays more on emotions and possibly like holidays, other things that you want to celebrate that might not be as seasonally focused on national holidays, religious holidays, what have you.
Gotcha.
You mentioned perennials, and so in my head, perennial stays out of the
Completely
equation,
out of all.
just because it does its own thing. And as Matt referred to, its life cycle continues on year to year to year.
Okay.
They still need care, but that said, there are bulbs from a spring seasonal standpoint. Some come back, some are so hybridized they don't. Pansies are biennials, so they can come back, but only 1 year. So when you kind of define it, I don't know if that's as important as knowing what the artillery is to solve questions for clients when you're approaching them to see, okay, what do you want? How do we get there? And because a lot of our design stuff we do is in such confined spaces, whether it's tree pits or large planters or entries or raised beds, annuals play a very big part in it. And they need to in order to provide that burst of interest and variety when you're planting and designing.
Sure. What about, okay, so how many, when we talk about annuals and whether you're planting them for, one-time use of the year or seasonals for a specific season, this is going to vary by the city you're working in, environment, and probably design trends too, or at least like market demand. But how many seasons are there, planting seasons are there in New York?
In my head, there's 4, like there's season, spring, summer, fall, winter. That said, it's difficult to get some plants to last for that entire season.
So I should have been clear. Not like so how many planting seasons are there for annuals? Is there more than 4?
Oh, yes.
There,
absolutely.
Because and I think that's interesting to talk on, because like, is there early spring versus spring, summer? Yeah.
Yeah, because bulbs won't last more than a couple of weeks once they start to come into that little tinge of color in the bud. And if it gets warm, they're done in 2 weeks. What's your backup?
Sure.
Pansies can tolerate snow being on them and come back robustly. So there's different things in what then you balance it with budget.
Sure.
So what does the client want? What can their budget afford them to do?
100%. Like, it's gonna, every client and every site's gonna be different. But like I'm just thinking, like, sometimes what do we dabble in max amount of like annual planting season? Because I just want it for the audience, like, it's, to us, like, we like, all right, well, sometimes we're making some plantings early spring, then we're going back there in late spring, and then again like early summer. We're adding like multiple annual seasonal plantings, right? Or annual plantings, and then winter. Sometimes our audience probably doesn't even think like, oh, is winter an option? So
yeah. I mean, in our area in New York, I find, summers. I think that's everybody's favorite season, but I think that's our best. It's my favorite. That's like our best seasonal planting window. Like, those plants that we'll put in like right before Memorial Day or right around Memorial Day, they'll last all summer and they'll get huge as we get these New York heat waves and hopefully some rain in between there to help hold us over. But the fluctuations that you see in the change in spring with temperatures and moisture levels, same thing with fall, that's where we see a lot more multiple rotations. Like Scott said, the bulbs might lead into a pansy or a African daisy, a later lasting spring annual to help carry you until it's really summer. Because these annual plantings, they're beautiful and they're great to look at, but they're going to make people think of stuff, and you don't want to be thinking about summer when you're in April. It might be a little too early. People are still waiting for that spring, that wake up, that kickstart. So a lot of it is playing on those emotions too.
Definitely. So we're getting like, that's shifting to like the intention, how you use them and the intention you have for using them in the design. So let's go there. I guess from your perspective, when designing an urban garden, like, walk me through how you guys like to or do not like to, and how you utilize annuals in your design development, garden development.
For me, the first thing, I have to remind myself to put myself in the back seat. The client.
You're going straight to the client. I knew that.
I also am going to turn around.
Reality.
If I do my job, I'll understand what they want, steer them in the right direction.
Sure.
And then hopefully get them to buy into John Minnie taking care of this work. So it's twofold. I want to design it and I'm going to sell it. Sure. Then I'm going to turn it over to Matt and his team.
Sure.
So, yes, there's that part of it, but I've seen some new and interesting things. I was on the bus going to an appointment, and somebody had removed all the plantings for a summer from tree pits, and there's like 8, so it's substantial.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just fresh sod that was put down. And I thought, never done it. Mm-hmm. I will put it in my arsenal. I mean, it looked architectural. It was clean. It was easy to take care of.
One of my first seasons here at John Many, we did just that, sod in a tree pit with bulbs underneath, and like the way it came out in the spring, it was beautiful.
Very cool.
Yeah, it was so cool.
So yes, the client, I mean, other than they say, we want color. Well, we don't want maintenance. Well, okay, who's going to take care of this? So understanding all those things, I think you have to, and then you put together your design. I love bulbs, but I don't think that they're going to last a long time in the landscape, so it's not a real go-to for me unless we have a backup right after it. Summer, like Matt said, though, that's when you can really start to enjoy to watch some of these arrangements and these plans come into fruition, and you're getting 6 months. It's our longest season.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So do you have a tendency to like educate or pull the client in a certain direction? Obviously the first step is 100% live in reality. You got to listen, you got to understand, what they want out of their space, what they're looking to achieve, what they're trying to achieve for their tenants, right? Do you ever find yourself bringing them in a certain direction, or is it on a client?
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
In regards to annuals.
But first I need to understand, even in anything, annuals, design just in general, understanding what they want before you can then say, this might not be the best way to go, and for these reasons. And most people are kind of logical about stuff, and they'll buy into it. The other thing is...
What are those? So you're pulling them in a direction based on functionality from like a maintenance or a horticultural perspective?
Yeah, I mean, if it's a terrace that's 30 stories up and, west facing and it's going to get wind, there are certain things I'm not going to do that. But explaining to them the whys behind it, that's why I think they call a professional, because they didn't think about that. They just saw it in Central Park and I want it on my terrace. So, okay, here's the reasons why. Let's look at other things. Is it the color you're responding to? Is it the shape? Is it the height? Give me that, and then I'll give you another solution on how to get there. But that's what people, I think, are coming to us for. They don't want to make mistakes. So,
what about you?
Well, from an operational standpoint, Scott, we totally thank you for taking into site conditions for all those jobs you spec, because oftentimes they're not, and that's where you have the biggest struggle. I'm a big firm believer in right plant, right place, so definitely take that to our seasonal annual approach too. Last time we were on the podcast, Mark, you were super into the analogies, so I've been trying to get my analogy chops up. So, I look at a landscape almost as like it's a stage, or like it's a sitcom that you're watching, and it's their family's house, or it's the play stage, and the landscape, that's your stage, and it doesn't really change too much. But your annuals, those are your cast of characters and all the people and all the things that happen that keep you interested and keep the show going. So a long story short, that's how I look at it. It helps change the interest and change up the garden throughout the seasons.
That analogy. Do you think about annual? So all right, so you have your landscape, right? And it's your set stage, like your foundational item with your trees that, maybe anchor the urban landscape, which are obviously incredibly important in the urban landscape. And then your perennials and your, hedges and bushes. And then do you think about annuals as like a portion or a specific spot in the landscape?
Yeah, I don't know about how proportion, I guess, depending on job size, but definitely take into account the location. Try to focus on entry lays or high traffic areas where people really are going to appreciate them. And I want people to see these annual displays, these plantings that we put out, and really take it into consideration and appreciate it and give them that little bit of escape and, relaxation. So somewhere where they can be enjoyed. I'm not going to stick it in the back corner of a garden. I want it to be front and center.
So go there. That's a great point. Like the specific spaces in the urban landscape that you want to, lean into annuals, entryways. So there are other spots you guys?
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of our public facing accounts, a lot of public plazas, a lot of people go there for lunch, take their break, morning coffee. So oftentimes those seating areas so they can really relax and enjoy and, take some respite from their busy day.
Cool. How about you?
I agree, and nice job on the analogy.
Thank you.
He loves analogies.
I'm learning.
No,
I love analogies.
it's a point also, I think, that in the space that we're designing or looking at to help with a client, that we understand how it's used, who uses it, and these public places sometimes are, can be subject to a little bit of overuse. And understanding what that is and not choosing maybe too sensitive a plant that can put in the plant material that can hold up to it, but still provide that punch of color that I think a lot of people associate with annuals. They do that. Perennials, they can be showstoppers for a month or two a season, and that's their whole thing. And they're green the other time. So the use of annuals, I think, has to be definitely utilized, not overutilized. It's not Disney World. And what do we want to achieve? What the client wants, I think, is going to drive it. And then it's up to us to make the better decisions and lead them in the right way to provide that level of impact for how are you using this? Is this the Plaza Hotel and these are people coming up in carriages and photo opportunities? Or is it a very calming meditation garden at a hospital and you want it to be just that, someplace that's more peaceful and quiet?
Sure, you can definitely lean into, emotional or environmental tone setting very quickly with annuals for sure. Now, I think you also brought up a really important point, a perennial. We use the words like perennial garden. Essentially, I guess throw it out there would be designing garden purely all perennials, no annuals. People, it's achievable and people want to do that often is all right, I want a perennial garden, but I want color or flowering interest at all times of the year. Extremely complicated and hard to do, without annuals to have that timing and duration at all times throughout the year. Maybe not all times throughout the year, but all times, maybe spring to fall.
Yeah, you'll have different plants. I mean, if you think about the High Line as a successful interpretation of it, you need large spaces to do that so that, yes, your eye can see different things coming into bloom, but it's not the same thing for a full season, which is annual.
Exactly.
So the benefit of having that in your arsenal, I think it's a great addition or a punctuation to a perennial garden. It doesn't need to just be perennials. And that will help you provide that color need or answer to a perennial garden.
Definitely. Without client or thinking about the sites you manage, would you use annuals in your landscape design if it was just you?
100%. Yeah, 100%.
Only annuals?
No. That'd be kind of cool. That'd be very wild. Very expensive.
Back to Disney World.
No. I mean, would you use annuals?
Yeah,
just any.
Absolutely. I think that they need to be intentional, and you need to know why you're using them. There's another part about financial that you talked about. There's reoccurring money, which is great for business. But does the client have that wherewithal to it? It also offers you to change up your look from year to year. That's an advantage. But if there's money is a big issue, then you might want to lean a little harder in the perennial end of things or landscape plants, and then just supplement that with the bang of an amazing perennial, maybe that's just little pockets within the landscape. But yes, I would always want to have them in the arsenal.
Okay. So how do you, if you're designing your own garden, how do you like to use annuals?
Well, I liked how Scott put it. It's what do you want to change up every year? I myself don't have the money to redo my garden every year. Not necessarily most people do either. But I'm a creative person. I need to exercise that creative muscle so I don't lose it. I got to keep being creative to help just strengthen my creativity and having the ability to, I call it, play with plants. I have fun just laying out annuals, trying different ones and making different arrangements. Sometimes very traditional ones, sometimes out of this world, but it's just something I like Legos as a kid, building stuff. So it's very similar. I just love the creative freedom it gives me on my own sites, client sites, public sites.
Definitely. What about you?
Our own home garden is a little more Zen inspired, and but to provide those moments, they're in containers, and they're where you might spend time at the entryway after you walk by a raked sand front yard to get in, around the outdoor dining areas, or when you're having coffee outside. I still want that, and I think you can feature them in more of an Asian Zen inspired moment. But and then you get to change those up. I like change. I don't want to have the same thing all the time.
Yeah.
But I like the calmingness of the background they're presented in.
Yeah, definitely.
Does that make sense?
No, 100%. I'm like in the same camp as you. I like planting things personally, and I like changing things up. And in the city, I have a small backyard garden. That's all we have, this small space.
I've been there.
It's super. Yeah, it's pretty sustainable. It's like all perennials. It's either like natives or non-invasive, non-native, non-invasives. But all right, it's doing great. I don't get to plant anything every year. I kind of like to, throw in some plants in there. But if your perennials are thriving, your trees, you shouldn't be taking them out and planting new things. So I like that, that garden. But then there's also I want those moments in my life where something's changing. I can do something new each year, and I can just get my hands dirty and plant things. So same approach. I have, so I go to the front of the house, just a few containers that, every season, not every season because I don't love every season, but summer and fall, I just love throwing out some annuals, laying them out, getting my hands dirty and doing something new every year. What function can annuals serve beyond just aesthetics?
Well, I like to think of New York, for example, where we work, not because of society and stuff, not too many native plants here, but also probably not too many native New Yorkers. A lot of transplants in the area who came here for careers, or they always dreamed of living in the city.
Analogy.
Another analogy. But their connection to nature and the tree that was at their grandmother's house that they swung from in the summer, or the lake that they used to vacation at. Those plants might not be native to here. So being able to use annual plants that perhaps could have been native to where they were, if you go to places tropical, some of the summer annuals, grow all year. That will help remind them of, some emotional attachment they might have to some childhood memories, or, they might be emotionally connected to these plants. So it's a way for me to connect people to plants.
Cool. I like that. Yeah, definitely. It's you can definitely draw so you're using them to draw some kind of emotional connection or memory or place in time, right? Not just look at that beautiful pop of color or vibrant display.
Definitely. I mean, this season in particular, I've explored a lot more using tropical plants, as you know, in our summer seasons. And I honeymooned in Hawaii when I got married, so whenever I see large tropical plants, large palm trees, brings me back to that, where I was in that, how I felt where I was in life.
Yeah, that's cool.
I agree, and listening to Matt explain this, I think some people walk by a place and love what it looks like. They couldn't quite tell you why, but they're responding to it, and it's 100% emotional.
Sure.
And I think that's a part of our job, but understanding the ability to evoke emotion in the springtime after a lot of snow and dogs and nonsense and garbage in the streets. If people see tree pits that are full of, vibrant daffodils that are coming up and blooming, they're happy.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, we did our job. What's up next for it? But the emotional part of what we do and what impact that brings, I think, is really important in society.
100%. I think that's it's a deep point, but I agree with it 100%. We think about it so much. I reflect on all right, why do these plants mean something to me? What are they, drawing up memory wise for me? I can think about what my emotions are and why when I see annual. And I think everyone has that connection to when they see us planting the annuals or them coming to life and they're beautiful. And it triggers that positive emotional response, but sometimes they're not maybe thinking about it why, we are, but that's awesome. Today very importantly, there's a lot of pressure in landscape design to avoid the use of annual plants out of like environmental sustainability. What is your guys' take on that?
I think you need to do both.
Okay.
I'm not that much of a purist that I would say you have to do this, but
what do you mean by purist? You mean like
purist,
strictly like native, like
natives, but pollinators.
Okay.
Besides just being natives and what impact they have overall on bees and beneficial insects, and then it's birds, and the birds do this. It's a bigger lifestyle than just us. So I think knowing what that impact, can we use more of that? The suburban lawn, per se, if a part of that is taken up and you do a planting that involves pollinators, then you're actually giving back. So I think that's something that we need to be as responsible people that are here for a while to consider. Annuals, there's no reason I don't think to change. Pollinators are not always going to be able to provide that emotional that we think we all talk about that evokes. And I remember the same tulips coming up in an area of the garden house I grew up in, and that meant something to me. I knew where they were going to come up. So those kinds of things I think that we need to remember and provide for clients to remind them of what was perhaps, but also be responsible about these pollinators and natives to do. And then there's regular landscaping. I don't see a reason that it all can't get along. We need to be involved with not planting invasives, and being responsible that way. But knowing these things, I mean, people planted bamboo in their yards, or these noxious weeds that are added and increased every year to the state. Russian olives is a favorite tree of mine. It's on the noxious weed list now for New York State. So being aware, being responsible, and being concerned about the environment. I think we need to balance those things. Broad answer to your question.
Balance is a good answer. Yeah, I agree. So you
got another analogy?
No way. This is crazy.
Well, I mean,
I want to hear it.
I love all plants. I love annual planting, seasonal plants, and I know that they're not as environmentally sustainable as some other plants, but there are things that we can do to help give back to the environment. Oftentimes we're recycling our annuals, turning them into mulch and compost, and then spreading them throughout our sites. So that's giving back in a way, but also...
That's a good point. So we'll actually also, can you give examples of why annuals aren't good for?
So I mean, they're it's a a cash crop, and it's grown for a short life cycle. It goes off the shelf, gets planted, it dies, gets thrown in the trash traditionally.
Longevity, right, is one of the biggest factors that it's not great for the environment. But I think that's why I wanted to go there. Then it's like, well, what can you do if you believe there's this role for annuals? Like, what can you do, or seasonals either? In the urban landscape, like what can you do to mitigate, the bad factor of it not being a plant for longevity? It's like, composting it,
of course, separating it or
reusing it in some capacity.
Green waste as opposed to normal waste, separating that, and like you said, composting, mulching it. That's great, but annuals, I like also to think of it as a way to like dress up a garden. Like maybe you have a party coming up, or you're a client and you have a big visit at your site, and you're like, you want to look good, and if you had a big meeting, you might go get your hair cut, you might shave. Luckily it's a podcast, you guys can't see my beard, but but you're not necessarily going to cut plants every day or trim them every day, but adding a little annual pocket here and there will really just help brighten things up, and kind of show a little bit of effort to like look good.
Definitely. You, Scott, you brought up like, a suburban example, like, talk about lawns and like, balancing things in suburban landscape. All right, maybe if you cut back the lawn a little bit, so you have a little bit lawn, but you add more perennials. Do you think annuals serve any different role in the urban landscape versus the suburban landscape?
Yes. I think they're far more used in a suburban landscape. Just because that's what people are used to.
Okay.
So I think it's an exposure part.
Okay.
Not bad or good or indifferent, whatever. It's just that.
So they're used more in the suburban landscape. Do you think
go into any shopping market or garden center in the spring or any season. What do you see? Mums in the fall, bulbs in the spring, pansies summer, geraniums, petunias, go crazy. They're not going to have perennials so much in these garden centers because they have to maintain them, and they're only small windows that they're going to be presentable and in flower and making it happen. So I think it's, accessibility to those things, but it's also knowledge. So this is something that I think we as stewards, business people, designers, need to be aware of and share that information with a client. And, if they're not headed in that direction, they're the client. That's where we're going to go. But sometimes they don't know that they might have gone there if we don't share that with them.
So what, outside of volume of use, like what do you think annuals or seasonals deliver any more impact in the city versus a suburb?
To me, they deliver the impact because of the amount of changes that we do. Spring, summer, fall, winter, sometimes 2 spring rotations, sometimes 2 falls because the plant material doesn't last as long. And that's just because it's New York. I think that's something that's kind of ingrained in people expect and they want. It's life, it's garden in the city, but it's also monetary. And is there always going to be a budget for that? Are there other solutions? I kind of like what the changes over are. But those are in confined spaces. So I think when it gets to larger areas that we need to be a little more, sustainable, environmentally conscious. But in these small areas, I think annuals really serve a purpose. And they provide that emotional contact, that color, that exuberance, that excitement that people want.
Sure. How about you?
Well, I definitely think they're more used in the suburban landscape, similar to lawns. I think a lot of it is societal norms, keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak. Like person down the street's got mums out. I got to go get some.
I gotta get
more
mums.
That's just how it goes. But as far as the importance of it,
impact.
Impact. I think in the city, in urban setting, it's much more important. Similar to what I touched on earlier with just urban cities, not necessarily people grew up there. So being able to bring seasonal plants that might remind them of their home or where they're from, I think really, makes people call a place a new home. But yeah, I think there needs to be synergy between perennials, annuals, natives, pollinators. It all has to work cohesively for a beautiful garden.
Yeah, I think that's like my take on it too, is use the word like confined spaces, or working in New York, us specifically in New York, concrete jungle, right, is its MO. Those small spaces, when all of a sudden there's like a pop of like color, or like some beautiful like annual or planting display, it really like has that much more like attention like brought to it, and impact for the person walking by it. And there's more people experiencing it generally than in the suburbs because of density and amount of people. So I think using like the word confined spaces like really can highlight like the impact, like a vibrant display can have.
It's an opportunity to engage people. Everybody's kind of seeing the same thing.
Definitely. So, you guys have any final thoughts on annuals and their use in the urban landscape?
Just that they're necessary. We need them. I need them to be creative, to have fun. I think it keeps everybody happy seeing that change. But just to round it out, again, we need synergy between all plantings to have a cohesive, thriving garden landscape.
Cool. How about you?
I tend to agree, and I think based upon what we've all talked about, they're important. I think from a responsible way that we could maybe back off of the use of annuals and use them more pragmatically to get the impact that we want, and rely on those pollinators, those natives that are going to be better for our environment long term. For those of us that have kids, That's a thought process with that. And I think that's an important thing to do. But annuals as a landscaper and somebody who's been doing this for 40 plus years, we'd be in a hard place without them. So I'm a big advocate. I just would use them more responsibly than probably the knee-jerk reaction of let's go plant 500 square feet of this.
Yeah. No, I love that. And there's another conversation we do on this podcast. How do you balance sustainability, functionality, and aesthetics in the landscape? And obviously also there's like an economics piece to that too. And I think we're always like in pursuit as urban landscapers of that balance, like, right? Like how do we nurture sustainability, the client's desired functionality out of that urban landscape, and obviously like aesthetics, which can, they're all intertwined with each other, but also aesthetics, which can, be a big, annuals can play a big role in. So I think it's all about figuring out that balance, and what we know today might evolve and that balance might change as we go forward. All right. Final question. We're a passionate group of people I bring on this podcast, love what they do. So I always end with the question. I'll give it to Matt first because he's ready for this question. What is something you're particularly passionate about in your craft right now?
Definitely seasonal plantings, annual plantings. More specifically fall. We're just about starting our fall. We're in full swing fall planting, but like we're about to start seeing it really come into show. And fall is just a really fun season to plant, like instant impact. Mums, like they're already grown. They just got to open up. Same thing with your cabbages, your kales, just the impact's right there. And, I love watching our summer plantings come into fruition, but just being able to lay something out and see that instant impact, it's like Legos and plants, I guess. So.
Summer's my favorite. Fall's my second favorite.
That's fair.
Cool. That's awesome. How about you?
I've spoken a couple of times today about pollinators and natives, and it was about 2 years ago at an event that we sponsored. I'm also the president of the Pines Conservation Society, and we had a doctor come out and speak to this about these, and I never understood the impact as much about involving them more in the landscape and not just having the lawn and these things, and how they impact other animals, birds and animals down the line, just by having things that are pollinators. So for me, that was an aha moment. That's something I needed to take more seriously. So that's why I brought it up a few times. It made an impact on me. And it's not too often when you learn something new at my age that you go, that's important. I should pay attention to this. And I can make a difference because of what I do.
Awesome. Cool. I love that. Awesome. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you guys joining the John Minnie podcast. I enjoyed this conversation, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, you. Mark.
Thank you, Scott and Matt, for sharing your expertise and experience in urban landscaping and sitting down and talking about annuals in the landscape. Thank you to all our listeners for taking their time and joining us on this journey. If you guys have any questions, ideas for future episodes, or my favorite, any constructive feedback, please email us at podcast@johnminnie.com. And as always, a big final thank you to all our clients at John Minnie Distinctive Landscapes. You guys allow us to make our passion our profession. None of this is possible without your support and vision to bring nature to the places people live, work, play. This episode's a wrap. I hope you guys have a great day, and be sure to find a moment in your busy day to cherish the nature around you.